We needed proof that he actually played and he was a good player. He's so humble though. Like he just started opening up and telling me about how good of a player he was. So that's why we needed you on here for proof as well. So
I tell you, Mike, he was a very, very good player. I thought he was better than he thought he was. That was his biggest weakness. He did not believe in himself as much as I believed in him. But he started coming around. I mean, for a big guy, he had great feet. He had good agility. He was good enough he could move well. He had quickness. But he was just not sure of himself. And you know that, don't you, Mel? You had
100%.
Yeah, we talked about, the Shrine Bowl, and I said, Mel, I would never have even considered nominating you if you couldn't have, make it. I said, you play with them. So I remember you were hesitant about that. You went down, you came back and says, Coach, I could play with them. It was good. So that helped you make the step in the NC State. And that, otherwise, I don't know if you would have even showed up. But
I probably wouldn't have.
But once you found out, maybe I can move around. I can play with these guys. So that Mel is a good player, Mike. He really was.
Oh,
Mel,
I appreciate that.
We know him as JR, but I know it is Mel.
Yeah, I know. That's what this JR. He can be whatever he wants to be now. He's a celebrity. He's got activities going on. Always a great person, though. Always a big smile, a great person. I got great memories of this guy. I would have played my hand to get those Packer pants if he wasn't. I would have made him wear. We got our brand new gold pants in, and I got the biggest pair they sold, and they didn't fit. And Mel, you couldn't get in them. And the only thing the sporting good guy says, well, I got another size up, but they're white. I said, the last thing I'm going to do is put a player on the field with white. That's like we do in youth league. We can do that in little league, but we're not going to do that in high school football. And we tried everything. Finally, we just checked in with the Packers, and they couldn't have been nicer. They actually sent 2 pair. We kept one for backups we didn't know if we could get anybody big again. And let Mel have his. Mel got to keep his.
So you didn't have a relationship with anybody up there? It was just a random phone call?
Honestly, it started from scratch. Went right through the office. Told them, and they said, well, I'm going to hook you up with our equipment manager. His name was Red.
Red. I remember his name, Red.
His name was Red. I told him the deal. He said, I just wanted practice pants that were gold. I didn't need it. That's what I thought we would get. I said, just give me some gold pants. He said, well, I need to know his waist size and his thigh size. He wanted all these specific things. So I said, okay, well, we'll give it to him. And then a package shows up. Nobody thought they were real. They thought they did not believe they were real, until we got them out of the box. And then when you look the label at it, they go, God, golly days. It was real.
And then the LOS came out and did the news story about it. And I remember the headline, it was Packers put Quitman in big pants.
Yeah.
That was a headline in the paper. And I remember that was something else. And after the games, after I got the pants and the newspaper article and everything, some of the players in the line shaking hands would want to see my pants, see the NFL logo on them and everything. It was pretty cool. It was a cool experience for sure.
There you go.
You talk about him being an offensive lineman and how good he was. Well, you knew something about that, right? Because you were an offensive lineman at Indiana State.
That's correct.
You were an All-American. You're in their Hall of Fame as well. Take us back to that time, 1969, 1973, Indiana State, and what it was like to play at that level and maybe, learn at that level that eventually became, your coaching career.
Well, I was very fortunate because I was a typical knucklehead in high school. Didn't take school serious. I attended prep school when I graduated, and then it was on a pretty good prep school team. We were in Washington, D.C. We were affiliated with a Naval Academy called Columbia Prep, and they had put a lot of players at Navy, including Heisman Trophy winner named Joe Bellino from the 60s. And And that would have been, way before your age and time would recall that guy. But in our era, when they said Joe Bellino went there, I said, hey, maybe I could go there now. It sounds like a good place to go. Well, after prep school, we had opportunity to go to Indiana State. My recruiting visit was fun. We went out just before Christmas. They just had installed the world's first outdoor AstroTurf. So the Houston Astrodome had the first AstroTurf, but it was indoors. And the outdoor was put in at Indiana State. And then they tearing down the old stadium look. It was really an old place, and they were going to do a modern, new upgrade, stadium. So that all fell in place, and I saw the vision, I saw the opportunity, and I a guy out of DC going into farmland Indiana, that's a big change. But they had good football players, and they had a good team, and I wanted to go there. I got home from the recruiting visit, and Maryland called and said they were wanted me to come over, and we were going to meet. And I told them I just got back from Indiana State. I got a scholarship, and they said, well, we want to offer you one. And I said, guys, I already shook on the deal. I said, we've already agreed that, I'm going to take it. So we shook on it. And I said, I better honor my word, and I lived in the Maryland area, and Maryland football really was stinky back in that era. So it wasn't any big deal not to go there. But I did like Indiana State. I saw the vision and the AstroTurf. We were actually making a transition from the old small college football, the Indiana Conference, into a upgraded conference schedule that would play the teams that you would think of today as mid-majors: Ball State, Akron, Eastern Kentucky, Western Kentucky, Central Michigan. We actually opened up with Cincinnati, and we were making the transition to go from that into a competitive, higher level play. So it was a lot of fun. I was very fortunate. Again, I got a break. I snuck on the field during a scrimmage on a Saturday morning. The coach was going crazy looking for a player, and I don't even think they remember my name. So I got out there and I had a good scrimmage, and they were able to find it. They identified me, who I was. Who's this guy out there blocking? So I won my starting job my freshman year in spring practice. And so I was able to start all 3 years at Indiana State, made honorable mention my junior year, and I was second team AP my senior year, playing at Indiana State. And Sport Magazine was a big magazine back in that era. I was the college athlete of the month in November of 1972. So I had good teammates, good coaches, and great memories. And don't get me started; I could go on, but that's a kind of real quick.
So you
great
had
offensive line coach, Mel. I had a great offensive line coach. Name was Larry Vanderhayden. After he left Indiana State, he ended up at Clemson with Danny Ford and won a national championship. And Vandy is well known and well respected from that era of the 80s for being a great line coach. Our offensive line, we text regularly. We have birthday wishes, the same 6 seniors. Every holiday, we have a text message. We have every couple of weeks, we keep up with each other. So our linemen had developed a bond and a friendship that many teams have friendships, but the offensive line have a niche. We have our own club, so to speak. The Unsung Hero Awards go to the linemen. They don't know your name. They know your number when you miss a block. That's all they know.
Only when you do something wrong, miss a block or jump off sides.
Yeah, just like at the IU game. That poor sucker jumped off sides. You know what I'm talking about, when they got a chance to, all they got to do is get one first down, the game is over, and he jumps off sides. And so, boy, he would have been heartbroken if they didn't pick it off at the end. So, yeah.
Right. And discipline was a big part of your coaching. And where did that come from? Where did that come from in your coaching style? Or did that start back from a coach and into your playing mentality?
Well, when I finished, I just loved sports all my life. It was a priority. I played baseball and I played basketball. I even wrestled one year. Sports was always, my go-to. It wasn't for sports, I don't know if I would have finished school. I loved it. It kept me kind of in a direction, and I wanted to be a teacher coach all my life. That was what I wanted to do, and I planned on doing that. And I got an opportunity to go from Indiana State into coaching in a small school across the Wabash River in Illinois at Marshall High School, and that was a good rural football program. The community was all Friday night; they were all into it. So my first experience of coaching was a lot of fun. And then the next year, I got a chance to be a head coach. I was 23 years old, and man, I thought I was ready. Whoa, what a learning curve did I have. One thing is to be able to coach linemen, but when you got to do the whole team and uniforms, equipment, facilities, mommy and dad meetings, booster clubs, all of a sudden it became a big job. And it took several years for me to get acclimated to the needs that you got to attend to. And I was in a small rural school in Indiana coaching, and the ag teacher and the chemistry teacher, who one of them had played baseball and one of them said he played football. I really wondered if he did, but they were my two assistant coaches. So I was trying to coach the coaches, and get the kids straight too. So I learned a lot early. I learned a lot. It took me a while to grasp all the intricate parts of coaching, relationships, motivation. I love the kids and I love motivation. So those two things were kind of my go-to. But learning schemes, that's another part of coaching. You can get, back then we didn't have all the games on TV. You go to clinics, but understanding how you want to scheme an offense, how you package it, how you have a situation, go to play calls, short yardage, how to make adjustments in a game when the other team is a little better than you thought they were and you can't get anything going. You need to make some changes, and you got to learn that stuff. You're not born with it. So it took me a couple of years to start working that around. And I think as the years came along and I got better assistant coaches and I started learning those things in the stages of leaving Rockville, Indiana. Coached at Apex High School outside of Raleigh. It was my first job in North Carolina. Great community. Love the people to death. Still have great relationships with early, families that we met and players that we met. And in Apex, from Apex, we moved to Fayetteville, where they had the Mid-South Conference was all 4A, and they were rock'em sock'em. I tell you, top to bottom, that's the toughest conference that I've ever coached in by far. I mean,
what were some of those schools?
We had
71st, Terry
71st
Sanford
was where I was, and we had Terry Sanford, Pine Forest, Doug Bird, E.E. Smith,
that's right.
And those schools right off the bat. I know Terry Sanford, Doug Bird, 71st. We all played for state championships in a regular way. Pine Forest was loaded always. Our non-conference games weren't Cinderellas. They were Richmond County, Scotland County, and Hope County. So, I jumped right into a fire down there in Fayetteville, and that was competition. It really was. Every Friday night, even one of the teams in the bottom half of the conference were knocking people off. So, and again, that transition going from Fayetteville 71st. We lived in Hope Mills, and that's where Southview was. Southview was a team that was at the bottom of the league. Their history was in 17 years of high school, they had only won 27 games. Wow. 17 years. Wow. And I say that again because nobody said, did you say 17 years, 27 wins? I said, that's all they had. And we lived there, and it shocked me. It shocked my wife. It shocked everybody when I said I'm leaving 71st with 2 state championships, a 12-1 team, and a lot of good guys coming back. And I go to Southview. And I tell you what, that was a scary change. That was scary.
Why? Why'd you make that change?
No one knows, and I still don't either. I think 9 years. I have this itch that comes out of me every now and then. Like, hey, let me try this. We were 9 years happy. Didn't have. I don't have one issue to say anything was wrong at 71st. We'd just built a new weight room, had great administrative support. We had gone from lifting on the stage to getting one of we called them huts. They were like little extra classrooms. We'd converted that into a weight room. And then the principal and the AD said, we're going to spend this playoff money. We're going to build you a weight room. So we actually built a real weight room with, just like the school, with brick and air conditioning, fans, floors, everything. It was super nice. So it was a great situation. But we lived in the Hope Mills community, and our kids went to school there. Hope Mills had its own identity. It was had their own little downtown area. They had the park. They had the little lake. They had their own hardware store. And my kids played in the sports program at Hope Mills. And I said, I think this could be better. I didn't know how much better it could be, but I thought it could be better. And I said, we'll give it a try. So I go to Southview High School. And 3 years later, we're state champions. We won the 1991 state championship. And then touch base when I mentioned the Mike, I had some great memories of some really good Joe Miller teams. Yeah. Man, they were powerhouses there at New Hanover. Joe had a great reputation. He still does today. And so we played Trott Nixon's boys in 91, and we had a great football game. That still goes down one of the best games I've ever seen, been a part of. We won 37-36 on the last play of the game. I mean, we scored 16 points in the fourth quarter. And we pulled that off and went in. The next week, we played undefeated, nationally ranked West Charlotte and won a state championship. So in 3 years, we'd gone from really doormats into a state championship team. And the next year, we were undefeated, went 12-1 before we ran into a really strong Northern Durham team. And we met them, I believe, third or fourth round. All these years come together, but anyway, the next it might have been it was a semi-state, because the next year they won the next week they won the state championship. But we were a pretty good team that year too, and we had to. Well, that was another rematch with Joe's team. New Hanover came to Southview to play, and that you talk about standing room only in a high school field. New Hanover and Southview at that game, Trot Nixon senior year revenge game. Our home community, all of Fayetteville was there. There was people in trees. I looked at the stadium. There wasn't anywhere to go. There were people climbing and sitting in trees on branches. They were everywhere. Wow. And
Coach, what was your game plan?
The only thing is we couldn't charge them. We couldn't, because they didn't come in the gate. They got to watch the game free. But we had a great time, and so awesome. We're coaching down there, and then I got the chance to move again. The itch came, and I got to move to the mountains. I'd asked a friend of mine if he worked for the High School Athletic Association. I said, man, if you could coach anywhere in the state of North Carolina, where would it be? He said, the mountains. And I said, really? I said, the mountains. I think he'd say Greensboro, Charlotte, big cities. The mountains. He said, it's a beautiful place to live, great place to raise a family, and they love football. I said, wow, that sounds pretty good. Next thing you know, I find out AC Reynolds has just got an opening. So I talked to a friend of mine who had played at AC Reynolds, and he made a little introductory for me to get my name on the table to get a chance to get the job at AC Reynolds, and that was 1994, and then I got to come to Rocket Country.
The old big green machine, baby.
Yes, sir.
For you, again, you're the only coach to win state titles at 3 different schools in the state of North Carolina. So is there a blueprint? Did you have a blueprint that you put into place every time you went to somewhere? Like you said, Southview didn't have a lot of success. Was the mantra, was that your blueprint?
Yeah, I'd heard a motivational story one time, or I probably read it in a Max Lucado book. In leadership, don't ever put the lid on the jar. Because if you do, that's as high as you're going to jump. And the story, I think, connects, with fleas who are supposedly have the ability to jump real high based on their little size. Because fleas jump. They don't fly. They don't run. They jump. And they can jump from dog to dog and stuff like that. In relationship, if a flea was the size of a man, it could jump as high as the Washington Monument in D.C. So, you put a flea in a jar, you put a lid on it, and the flea's jumping. They think you can get out of that jar, and it keeps hitting its head on that lid. Eventually, that's as high as it's going to jump. So it doesn't use its ability to jump out, and you can take the lid off, and it won't jump any higher. So it's like when I went to Southview. The sky's the limit. We don't want to just win one game. We want to win every game we play, but we're going to do it one at a time. We can't go 10-0 in one game, but you got to be ready to play one game at a time, and then you take care of business, and then you don't put any limits of what you're capable of doing. And one story, and I love our principal. He loved football. Ron Dalton loved AC Reynolds High School. He wore green and gold socks. He wore green and gold underwear. I mean, he was green and gold. He loved
green and gold blood for sure.
He did, and he was one of a kind. He loved sports. He loved football, and he told me, he says, "Coach, I know you won some state championships and all that." He says, "But we only got one thing up here you've got to do: be king of the mountain."
King of the mountain.
You got to be king of the mountain. He said, you win all these games up here. We don't care if you go off the mountain and don't win a state championship, but just be king of the mountain. No. And I didn't tell him this, Mel, because Mr. Dalton, you love him, but you disagree with him. You don't ever disagree with him. I never told him. I says, "I'm not putting the lid on that jar." So we have to go down off the mountain to beat somebody. So lo and behold, a couple of playoff games, they came up our way, but in '99, our state championship, it's the first one.
Breaks my heart. I couldn't win one, man. And you won it the year after I left. Why couldn't you wait at least a couple of years?
Well, I got some thoughts on that, Mel.
Okay.
So here's what happens. We're playing in the third round, and Coach McCurry says, "Man, I hope we win." We're watching game film on our opponent in the third round, Anson County. He said, "I hope we win," and we all kind of like just looked at him. He was like, "Well, that's a really good thought, Coach. I'm glad you came up with that one." And I said, "Any special reason?" He says, "Yeah, man. Because if we win, we get to play Richmond County." He says, "Oh, I've heard all this stuff about Richmond County." This was back in the 80s, and they'd won like 3 straight state championships in a row. They had Mike Thomas and the herd of great athletes there. And he says, I said, "Oh, I see. So you want to see what Richmond County's like." And then, so we win, and now we got to go play Richmond County. 44 straight wins. We're going to go off the mountain. Now we go off the mountain. We got to go down the mountain. Not only do we go to Charlotte, we go through Charlotte. We got to get on the other side of Charlotte, and we got to play Richmond County. But there's no lid on the jar. There's no lid on the jar. And those boogers went out there and played lights out, and I think they shocked a lot of people. It didn't shock anybody at Reynolds, because those guys had big hearts and just played smart and hard and pulled off a win at Richmond County, and then the next week won a state championship. See now, Mel, you played in '87, graduated in '88. Your senior year,
97, 98.
Yeah, 97, 98. Yeah. Your senior year, you guys had a good group of seniors, but your junior class was really weak. There were only a few juniors that could play. We had to bring up 5 sophomores, that year. And that was our weakest link. We were inexperienced at a lot of positions, but we had a good season, Mel. You went out on a good note, conference championships and stuff like that. But you got to have a full stable to be a good team. You just can't have good players. You got to have a good team, and it takes a lot of guys to make those positions fit.
Yeah, that's true. They it just thinks a couple of them, I still talk to a couple of them every now and then, and they throw that in my face like, yeah, you never won one, but I did the year after you left.
Okay.
So they got bragging rights on me.
Part of that is what I think sets the tempo. We started out with several conference championships like that, and that starts building. It goes from there into the next, process that your program develops that identity, and you start becoming a winning program. And that carries over to the younger guys that are a part of that growing into the culture of being successful. So don't think for a minute, don't sell yourself short. I tell those guys in '94, my first year, they pulled off a winning season in a conference championship. I said, you guys were a big part of a foundation of a culture that put AC Reynolds in the momentum to build for a state championship team. And, 99, we broke the mold, but, we won in 02. Of course, we'll talk about Ben Johnson. But they won another state championship and played for another one. So it's a team that can bring it, and they're still capable of doing that any given season.
Yeah, you mentioned Ben Johnson. His name obviously has been brought up this year. The season he had as a head coach of the Bears, your name was brought up because of that as well. What does that tell you about what you've done and the impact you had? That's just one person, but obviously you've had impacts on people like Mel and other people as well.
Well, we try to have as good a relationship with our players as we can. They're not perfect. We're all human, but I think the kids realized once they became a part of our program that it is kind of like the parable of the good soil. We want good soil, and that means, we have a good program. We work year round. We lift weights. We use agility. We run. We have summer program. We had good coaches, that when you got coached at your position, we had good men that could coach you. They would be men that would spend all weekend watching film and getting you prepared so that you could be ready. We had a strong community, good support from Fairview and the community. We had a great administrator in Ron Dalton. So the culture is like the biblical process of the good soil. Good soil has got to, you got to work it. And you get rocks in that soil, you got to get rid of the rocks. You got weeds, you got to keep the weeds out. But you've got to keep the soil, taken care of so that you don't choke. We have good soil at AC Reynolds. And then Ben talks about that. Ben said when he was a youngster, his dad was my assistant coach. When I took the job at AC Reynolds, Don Johnson and I had coached against each other. He'd been at Scotland County. So he asked me about joining the staff, and I said, well, yeah, sure. Let's talk. And, I've already accepted the job, but we'll talk and visit. And then he came up to Asheville and we walked around, met the principal and everything. So it developed into, Don bringing his family to Asheville. And I think Ben and Casey and Kyle, his three kids, they were all just little elementary school kids then. So
they were always around and everything.
Ben has said, he kind of grew up, in that elementary school age, being in a locker room, and he liked, that atmosphere that we had, and we had done good, better, best from 1994. We won a ball game, we do good, better, best, and and that was our chant, our victory chant. I mean, and we kind of did it as an identity. I mean, it was something we wanted to do in the locker room. Let's get this, celebration, and we had fun with it. Good, better, best, and in the culture of that locker room affected Ben, and so good, better, best, kind of I understand when you leave, coaches want their own identity. So and I don't think it embarrassed them, but they were kind of like, well, we didn't do that after Bobby left. We do other things, but that they probably identified that with me, and a coach wants a little, his own flavor, And so, I said, you guys don't need that. They said, well, I wish we'd done it though. I wish we would have kept it because it's cool. But anyway, Ben remembered it. And I think what really triggered Ben remembering it was his teammate, Chase Rice, the country music singer. He did good, better, best. When I saw Chase, he told me he did it when I saw him back in Asheville one year, and he says, "Coach, we do good, better, best, before we go on stage." I said, "What?" He says, "Yeah, the band, we all get together and we do good, better, best. Never let it rest till your good gets better and your better gets best."
Better gets best.
And then they all head to the stage, and so
that's so cool.
They did that. And Ben, I guess he thought back to it, and whoever would have thought the high school chant would be effective in a NFL locker room, especially a storied NFL franchise, the Chicago Bears, monsters of the Midway. So good, better, best is alive and well, thanks to Ben and the Chicago Bears. I have had so many outsiders from New York Times, Washington Post, the Chicago Tribune, the Chicago Sports, ESPN. It's been like they want to know more and more about it. So I've been telling everybody the story. Picked it up at an FCA camp when I was coaching at Southview. I heard my coaching friend Richard Bell did it with the FCA kids, and I liked it. I said, I got to have it. So I didn't know when I would use it. I don't know when it became my thought, but when we didn't have a fight song at AC Reynolds, I had to come up with the plan B, and good, better, best was plan B.
And it worked. It worked out. We used to love chanting that loud so the other team could still hear it on the field and it was the best. It was the absolute best.
Yeah, that's a rally cry. Let everybody know we knocked one down and we're going to get another one. Yeah, that's the thing. It never ends. You play good, we're going to get better until we get it. Go to the best. You never, and it might even fit in. I've never thought about it. Maybe fit into that little process that we've got no lid on the jar. Good, better, best does not put a lid on the jar.
That's right. So, Coach, when did Powwow Quickness Wins come into play?
Powwow Quickness Wins. That was really quick. You could go up to an AC Reynolds kid today and say Powwow, and they'd answer Quickness Wins. Just like you remembered,
Oh, no doubt. When did that come into play? Where that the same FCA camp, or when?
No, I did that at 71st.
Okay.
And I had coached in rural towns, Marshall, Rockville, Apex, and then when I got to 71st, these guys could all fly. I mean, they could outrun the cars on the road. I said, "Gee whiz, you guys are fast."
It was those little Linton boys, right?
We're just going to win around here, And so I just said, "You guys are quick. You guys are fast." So I was leading stretching one day, and we were getting ready to do the butterfly, and I nicknamed it Powwow. You didn't have to be politically correct. And thank goodness I don't know how to be politically correct, but Powwow, it looks like a bunch of Indians sitting around the campfire. We're down in the butterfly position. It looks like it's like, I said, we called it Powwow. Powwow, the quickest wins, and then and we would reverse it. I said quickness wins, the players would yell, Powwow. So
Are you surprised at all again that these things have come back so many years later? Again, Ben Johnson bringing it back maybe certainly helps, but what does it do for you, and what memories does this all bring back? The good, better, best, and to see somebody like Ben Johnson have the success he had this year.
Well, Mike, I kind of been retired for quite a while. I am involved with high school coaches. I have a affiliation with a ministry called Coaches Outreach. We have Bible studies. I've got 28, 29 high schools under my umbrella that have a Bible study through coaching material, coaching scripture, with application to be a good person, to be a good coach, and to work with your kids. And the Bible study material is all developed into a book form, and we get a new one every semester. So I've got like I said, 28, 29 schools under my umbrella. And I've got leadership at each of those schools that help that happen. And so I still visit coaches. I mean, the local area, I've got about 4 schools that I'll go to every week just to check on coaches, just talk to them, see how they're doing, go to practice, have a relationship with them, give them the coaches Bible study material, try to lead the coaches, local coaches. I try to lead their studies. But some of my relevance, it's changed to be, well, can I help you, in your journey of faith? Not so much. I'm not there to draw play. I let the coaches know, hey man, you guys got more plays than I ever dream of. Your schemes are different. You're in spread, and you got offensive plays and they got gigantic weight rooms everywhere nowadays. So I said, I'm not here to coach you up. So don't feel like intimidation. And all of them are real kind. He said, well, if you ever see anything, and I go, well, yeah, okay. But I tried not to. I don't want to be around. I don't want coaches around. I'm there to assess them. I want to be there, have a friendship. So I have it, but I was kind of just enjoying that and not thinking much about my days of coaching. It was kind of like just working with the new ones, and this with Ben's success has caused a rekindle of appreciation and remembering the journey of coaching, and so many players, Mel, have got back with me about good, better, best. I mean, I was getting text messages and checking in. Guys are calling and they say, "Hey, coach, they're doing good, better, best," and everything. And then the guy at 71st says, "Coach, how come you didn't tell us about good, better, best?" And I go, well, honestly, I didn't know good, better, best till the 90s. We just had Powwow. Quickness wins. So it's been fun. I've talked to my son Kyle. He was a sophomore on Mel's team, and he was a linebacker on the 99 team. And those guys keep up with each other, and they've been interacting. And Isaiah Johnson, those guys, they're all excited that part of their experience of a locker room, they identify with that little bitty touch. They're probably all Bear fans like crazy. We're all rooting for Ben, but I think they're rooting Ben and for the Bear. My whole neighborhood down here, they're all our neighbors are Bear fans now. They've jumped on the bandwagon because of good, better, best. But it's been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it. And some of the guys would ask me, "When's the last time you talked to Ben?" And I said, "Well, Ben's a pretty busy guy. He's got
a lot going on.
He's got a lot going. He probably got more interviews. He can, he's one thing after another. He's coordinating, his offense. He's got all this stuff going on." I said, I don't ever, if I do anything, it would be after the season. So I waited till the season was over and I gave him a quick text, and he gave me a text. I didn't expect him to answer me if he even did answer me. I said, he probably doesn't even know who I am, So I said, I texted him, and he goes, and he did get back with me that night. He said, "Hey, coach, man, thanks so much." But we're all proud of him. He's a part of our process. The Mel Quitmans and Bobby Passes, we're in that locker room with Ben Johnson, and he's now in the NFL locker room, and he's doing it. He's getting it done.
I tell you what, man, AC Reynolds is putting out some celebrities and with Ben Johnson and Luke Combs and Casey Rice and Caleb Presley, Chad Allegra. He's a big time pro wrestling superstar and stuff. He told me to tell you hello.
Oh wow, Chad, that's right.
Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy because that's what he always said he wanted to do. High school.
Isn't crazy?
That's all he ever wanted to do.
Yep.
What's his wrestling nickname?
Carl Anderson. Okay. Carl Anderson. The machine gun, Carl Anderson.
Okay. The big green machine gun. There's
big green machine gun.
Yeah. Wow. That's great. Well, it's been a lot of fun, and I was going to say, if Ben made it to the Super Bowl, I would have really gotten famous.
Well, good, better, best. It's on T-shirts and all. Are you
Good,
getting
better,
a cut?
best,
Are
yeah.
you getting a cut of the T-shirts here?
Hey, listen, I've got a good, better, best sweatshirt that
Nice.
one of my really good friends in Chicago, he sent it to me. And I tell you, during the game, after they do it, people I don't even know are sending me clips of good, better, best. I mean, they is really, and I, you know, like I said, I was actually in Chicago for a friend's funeral, and it got a little flavor of it. But my Chicago friends, being in Indiana, I've got several. My roommate's from Chicago. My Indiana State roommate, a wrestler, he's from Chicago.
Oh, okay.
And so, and my really good friend that sent me, he's, you know, Chicago, he's got season tickets to the Bears. He said, "You can't believe what's going on up here." He said, "It's everywhere. T-shirts, hats, people yelling it, screaming it, walking down the street, and people start yelling good, better, best about what? Well, anything. I mean, they would just eat up with it. You can walk down the street of Chicago, go good, better, best, and they'll go Bears. You know?"
Wow, that's crazy. It's a worldwide phenomenon.
Well, again, I could tell from, as you say, Mel, the smile on his face. Again, the reaction that people have. It's a slogan, yes, but it comes from you, Coach. And I could tell that you had a big impact, and you still do. Like you said, you're still kind of coaching, not players, but other coaches, and the message might be a little bit different, but certainly you've had a tremendous impact on that goes beyond high school football, obviously.
Well, the impact is reciprocated when the players and the friends and the people all, you know, we come back. It's a two-way street. We get to share each other's friendship, and that's what sports. One of the great things growing up in America, and you know, and for us old school guys, we don't know if these friendships, like the offensive linemen that we had at Indiana State, you know, 50 some years later, that's 6 of us are still in the same text message group. We were together. We didn't have the portal. We didn't get changed. High school kids changes, you know, they change in schools. College teams, they don't develop those bonds like they think they do, but they're not that close. They're not close like we were. It's a whole different world. You know, and I think it's the way life is. The world's different, you know, in every way, for successes and failures and what we see and what happens. But I think the old Friday night lights of nothing would beat those days where kids you went to school with, you know. See, that's the other thing, you know. Now the people move around all the time. So these kids grew up together. They went to elementary school together, you know, and they're friends. And now all of a sudden, their Friday night lights are taking the field together, and that's where that comes from, the smaller towns. You know, that's the identity that Reynolds and Fairview community could have. It's the identity that Hope Mills and Southview could have, and the identity that we had, you know, at 71st. You know, so it's something that's very special. I don't know 20 years from now if former players will talk about their teammates and their friendships and their experiences like our generation can still do.
Speaking of the community and the family feeling that we all had at Reynolds and being a part of that community and everything, how was it with Hurricane Helene and everything up there afterwards, dealing with that situation?
Well, as
and how
y'all
turn out?
You know, Reynolds and Fairview got hit as hard as anybody.
Yeah.
through Craigtown, and Coach
Craigtown.
Craig losing 13 members of his family, and people that we knew, and the hardships that the first time I saw Coach Craig after the hurricane, it was like, it tear you up. It was. And I knew it wasn't gonna be any fun, but just seeing him, just kind of, you know, I knew his mom and dad, and you know, and it was tough, you know, and with great people, they're gonna, you know, they bounce, they resilience, and they come back, and they're moving forward with it, and they're making progress.
Yeah, we know, being on this side too, how hurricanes can devastate you, but yeah, it seemed like that was certainly something we haven't seen before. So a couple of years later, I'm sure it's still big time recovery, everything going on out there, and again, I'm sure somebody like you being out there maybe lifted their spirits a little bit, having somebody be involved with some of the stuff that was going on out there.
Well, they have been through a lot for sure, and they are making progress. It is getting better, and it's and now we live in situations. You've got to be able to be tough. You got to be able to get knocked down and get back up in every way. You just you got to. Life is really, if you have a good foundation and faith, you've got that foundation to weather the storms. If you build your house on sand, you don't come back. You build it on a rock, it can you can bounce back.
Well, Coach, this has been a lot of fun for me to get to know you and to get to know Mel's story a little bit more. And again, the impact that you had on him. Again, I can just tell, if he's one person, the impact you've had on so many, young men through your career. We can't thank you enough for spending a little time with us today and sharing your exceptional and incredible story with us here tonight.
Mike, I'm honored. And that, it's the guys like Mel that make it all worthwhile. That you look back and you see him, it's kind of like, say, 25 to 27 years ago, we were player coach 27 years ago, and you go, it was just the other day, buddy. I was getting his pants were getting out of that box in that weight room. We were just showing up just the other day.
Oh, man.
Mike, I told him I was thinking of him, and I just remember, I said, man, if he ever believed in himself as much, he might have been not only wearing those pants on Friday night, he could have worn them on Sunday. You were good, boy. You had feet, you had agility, you had good quickness. Yeah. Quickness wins, and a big man, over 300 pounds. Yeah. Guy could move. Thanks, Junior. JR.